Remaining inward, we'll take this affirmation for self-healing from Swami Ananda into our hearts. First, listening to these words of inspiration on self-control. If a lake is made to feed into too many streams, it will soon become drained. Similarly, if a person's heart energies are fed into countless streamlets of desires, he becomes drained. Eventually, even the power to feel. Sated with pleasure, he grows dry, blasé, and indifferent to even the greatest wonders. The sensualist imagines that by giving up his pleasures, he would renounce happiness. But in fact, the more one restrains his senses and learns to live in the peace of the inner self, the more he finds himself glowing with happiness, good health, and a radiant sense of freedom and well-being. We'll practice the affirmation now together, first repeating aloud with a very strong awakening of your subconscious mind, repeating after me. I am strong in myself.
I am strong in myself.
I am complete in myself.
I am complete in myself.
The joy and perfection.
The joy and perfection
Of the universe.
of the universe.
Await discovery.
Await discovery.
Within my inner being.
Within my inner being.
And now a bit softer in a speaking voice. I am strong in myself.
I am strong in myself.
I am complete in myself.
I am complete in myself.
The joy and perfection.
The joy and perfection
Of this universe.
of this universe.
Await discovery.
Await discovery.
Within my inner being.
Within my inner being.
And now in a whisper, softly, but still strongly. I am strong in myself.
I am strong in myself.
I am complete in myself.
I am complete in myself.
The joy and perfection.
The joy and perfection
Of the universe.
of the universe.
Await discovery.
Await discovery.
In my inner being.
My inner being.
And now, silently, awakening the superconscious at the point between the eyebrows, repeating each phrase with every ounce of your being. I am strong in myself. I am complete in myself. The joy and perfection of the universe await discovery within my inner being. And now feeling this prayer alive, each phrase in your heart. I crave nothing that the world can give me, Lord. O infinite perfection, make me one with thee. Om. It's extremely powerful. So we're on week 12 of Rays of the One Light, the weekly commentaries of the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible. So we get to listen to these words of wisdom on the topic for this week. We are children of the light. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. It is common for people to perceive themselves according to their present realities. A person in ill health says, I am ill. Few say, I am well, it is my body that is suffering. People in a low income bracket say, I am poor. Only the unusual person will say, though outwardly I live in poverty, inwardly I am wealthy. Thus, when it comes to moral and spiritual development, people commonly identify themselves with their mistakes and weaknesses. They consider it almost a sign of humility to say, I am a sinner, though in effect what this means is that they identify themselves with their sinfulness, not with the soul's power to transcend all limitations in God. The great masters, including Jesus Christ, have always emphasized the divine potential of mankind. To encourage us, they address us as children of the light, not of darkness. The Bible in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, makes the point that our true home is not the mud of this earth, but the light of heaven. No man hath ascended up to heaven, it tells us, but him that came down from heaven. This passage continues, even so the Son of Man who is in heaven, emphasizing that Jesus, though he lived on earth, is perceived by the eye of wisdom as conscious, even in human form, of his true reality in heavenly spheres. The way to know God is to live in godly consciousness and not to bewail our imperfection and our distance from God. Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And the Bhagavad Gita states, "Seekers of union with the Lord find him dwelling in their own hearts. But those who, lacking in wisdom, seek him with impure motives, cannot perceive him, however much they struggle to do so." If you want to know God, Paramhansa Yogananda said, live in the thought that you have him already. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om. Om. Om.
I love it. Children of the light. What a really lovely definition for us all, isn't it? You know, it's easy for us because we've got a bright light shining in our eyes, but as we go about our day, it's
Jesus. He has the Holy Trinity.
Three lights shining. It'd be remiss of me not to start with a dad joke, wouldn't it? But this is a bit of a quiz. Can a kangaroo jump higher than a house? Of course. A house doesn't jump at all. And it's kind of pretty relevant to today's talk, if you think about it. It's really how we perceive things. And last week we talked about, identifying with our soul, and then if we choose, because we talk about it all the time, I live in your center, live in your center, live in your center. And what does that really mean? And we got to the nuts and bolts of it last week with this circle of, here is our soul, and then we have the outward presence of where we actually live, and that basically projects out from there into ego, and that's how we live. So what does it mean when we talk about the light and living in the light? And a nice way to look at it is a tuning fork. So God created where we are by a vibration, and if you look at a tuning fork, if you just touch the tuning fork, it would have to vibrate, and that sound would go out. And if you think about that, there would be a light and a shade to that. If we think about it from light and shade, there would always be light and then darkness. So Swami talks about the pendulum, and he says, well, if God puts energy out into the light, like a tuning fork, there has to be a backward momentum equal to that for there to be a vibration. Otherwise, it just doesn't exist. And so we live in this realm. If you think of that pendulum being, where does God fit? Where does God live? And God actually lives in the stillness, the part in between. It's not the light or the darkness, it's the part in between. And so that swing really is getting rid of the ego side of things, isn't it? If we live out there, then that pendulum just keeps swinging back and forth, and we're kind of at a point now, aren't we? Everyone here, I'm making assumptions, but we want to get rid of that pendulum. We want to get away from that. I had an experience this week. I caught up with an old friend who's works for a not-for-profit. He works for surf life saving, actually in New South Wales. He does all the education things, and he was talking about he has to continuously keep his team motivated, his high level. And I said to him, "Oh, you guys do such an amazing job. You're out there helping and saving lives. You know, we take for granted how many people can't swim that come to the beach and want to enjoy this lifestyle. So not only teaching lifesavers how to save lives, but teaching people how to survive in this environment that we live in." I said, "How often do you remind people or ask people what the goal of your job is?" You know, and goes, "Oh yeah." You know, I said, "Well, you lose track, don't you, in life about what your goal is?" You know, he said that the most common question that you get asked working for a not-for-profit is, "Well, I should get paid more." And, you know, so it's again coming back into this realm of ego of, well, where am I? And you forget what you're actually doing and the rewards that you're giving out. And so it's kind of an interesting way to look at it, is if we take away just even finance in itself and just replace it with energy. Like energy is this toing and froing of where it comes, but we want to center it. We really want to be at that point where it ultimately doesn't matter. We want to live in that light, to be perfect channels, to allow the outward effort. So I'm going to ask you guys, what is your goal? You've come onto this path. What is your goal? And how often, I'll put my hand up, my goal is to unite with God. It's to be one with God. How often, what percentage of your day is living that goal? Is keep aspiring to that goal. And it's really hard to do that if we're living in that outward part. We're living in the ego. And it kind of gets a bit confusing, doesn't it? Because it's like, well, surely I could do that if I just went to a cave and meditated. But we know that that's not the reality. We have to be channels. And to be channels, we have to attune to that. We have to be still enough to attune, but to bring that in. Otherwise, if we all just did that, then nothing would exist. We've already proven that we would all meditate, we'd all unite with God, and then this dream, this entertainment would not exist anymore. So we have to be a part of it. We have to play, we have to be in the light and sharing that light to keep the balance. Ultimately, that's what it's all for. And so what Swami's talking about, or this book's talking about, is we don't want to affirm that darkness. We want to affirm the lightness. How often through life do we affirm where we're at? And we want to affirm that we are with God. We are God in everything we do, because that affirmation keeps us moving towards the light. If we don't, if we keep thinking, hey, I'm just you know, a banker. That's all I do. I just crunch numbers every day, and I go home and I do those numbers to support my family, and that's where I sit. Well, that's where you sit. And that affirmation's really interesting. And we start then getting caught up in the delusions of it. Well, I had a client that didn't pay, so I've got to chase that person down, and then you get caught up into it. I had this funny experience that I'd like to share. We popped Arati to bed and we're sitting in front of on the couch, and we just heard this yelling and screaming. We heard some profanities. We looked out this window, and here's this young fella in nothing but his undies, but someone chasing him down the road, but blood squirting everywhere. He obviously cut his hand, but blood spurting everywhere, and there was profanities and this chasing around.
This was Friday.
This was Friday night, and then he was out of control. He was going to run like onto a busy street, and so my paramedic previous life jumped in, and Kalamali jumped onto Triple O.
I did not dial 911.
And quite her experience for her. She goes, I didn't understand a word that they were saying.
Sorry.
I was speaking in Aussie. So it was quite the experience. But anyway, we went out there, and I, on the way out, I prayed to Master. I said, look, just, let's sort this out, And here's this young kid, he's cut open his hand, he's had something. I didn't actually want to go into it, how he got where he was. I just said to him, mate, I'm here to help. And the I think it was his dad that was with him, and they were toing and froing, and blood's flying everywhere, and he's toing and froing, and I just want to be left alone, and I'm looking at it thinking, wow, if you just want to be left alone, why are you behaving this way? Because now you can imagine that
Cops.
police are getting called, ambulance are getting called, all the neighbours are out, everyone that's driving past stopped, and the more people that turned up, he just kept swearing and cursing and carrying on. And I'd sort of built this rapport to him. I'm saying, mate, why don't we just go and sit over here, and if you stop swearing and yelling, people will actually go away. You know, if your goal is to be left alone, and in the back of my mind, my goal would be, hey, look, let's just patch your hand up. You jump in a car, you'll go get some stitches, maybe some surgery. But of course, the more people came, the more he'd fire up. But his affirmation of where he was he'd obviously done some tough things. He'd lived in this egoic world of where it was. And, you know, he had this agitation with police. He had this agitation with uniform. He had this agitation with everything that was going on. But really, ultimately, all he wanted was to be left alone to sort himself out. But his energy was just going in a different way. And I was like, well, we all kind of do that, don't we? You know, like our goal is to unite with God, but we're so busy getting caught up in these little things, you know, we're flowing ourselves around, we're creating a disturbance, but then we're saying, but we don't want that disturbance, you know, we're doing this, but we don't want that, you know, and this up and down of life. And it was just well, I found a little bit of humour in it, just because that's where my world had been before. But it's so interesting, isn't it, that we live in that way. So it's living out of that affirmation. It's choosing the affirmation of, no, I do want to be peaceful. I do want to be calm, and I do want to do this. So, you know, regardless of what happened and how you cut your hand, the fact is you do want it fixed, but do I have to carry on? Do I have to involve everyone with this? You know, do I need to do this? But so the interesting thing about that is in our lives, where do we not want to be? What's an indication that we don't want to be there? And one of the things that I find, and it's spoken about a lot, is that little bit of resistance. It's easy to find something to fight when you've got a resistance, isn't it? It's like, well, I'll just argue the resistance mode because it's powerful in me. And then you start down that path and you get caught up in the yelling and the screaming and of life's character. But that little bit of resistance, if you can stop it in the first place and say, hold on, what's my lesson here? What's coming in here? If I face it, will it go away? And I think that's one of the little things that we can do to be in that light. It's finding the resistance and then choosing the light, choosing what is my goal. Will this help me go into the light, or will it put me in the shadows where we don't want to be? And it's interesting. I like this story about that Swami talks about. He was doing an interview for a radio, I think it was either in Italy or France, I can't remember which one, but they interviewed him halfway through his spiritual journey and said, oh, what's your favourite musics? Swami Kriyananda, and he said, of course, mine, before he even thought about it. And if you look at that in its simplest self, you think, wow, what an egoic person. But there was no ego in there. What he actually really thought about it, and it came across him later on, he goes, of course it's mine, because what I've done is removed Swami Kriyananda out of the way to be creative. And what's been created isn't mine, it's God's. But I've put every part of my will into the music that I do. And so therefore, it should be your favourite piece of music. It should be your favourite, because why? You're a channel of the divine creativity that's allowed to flow through you. And if we go through life doing that, everything that we do, we get ourselves out of the road, get that ego out of the road, become that channel of light, then everything we should do, we should be proud of, not in an egoic way, but knowing that we're doing it for God. And it's such a different way of living. And then it's also about where we surround ourselves. And Swami talked about why community is so important and why beautification is so important. And it's kind of an interesting thing, because if you allow beauty And if you think about the attraction that people have to Ananda communities around the world, or beautiful gardens, beautiful parks, beautiful scenery, I think we're very spoilt with beauty in Australia. But why? What is that? And Swami said that living in love and beauty is about bringing God and the angels into that environment. It's kind of interesting if you take it away, it's like devas and angels get removed from where we are because we're crowded. They don't like the shadow, they don't like the clutter, they don't like the tamasic energy. They want that love and light, and it's a part of our environment, a part of our community. So I'm going to use community because your community is where you live. It doesn't necessarily mean this one or an Ananda community. But if you want it, like the two examples, you have someone that serves the community and is a service to God. If the environment's right for God and the vibration's right, of cleanliness, of simplicity, of joy, of peace, which you can use with what God's given us, you're going to attract those things. You're going to bring back in the devas and the angels and the amazing things that come in. And there was a great debate in Ananda a while ago whether they should make some money out of clearing some trees. And it's kind of interesting. It's like all things. And I heard I'm going to put Eliza on the spot, but Eliza said this. It's like, if you have weeds and you have overgrowth, even though they're a part of this, if you don't clear those out, it's hard to grow roses. It's hard to bring that beauty back in. And it's a really important lesson in life, isn't it? We need to get rid of the things that we're a part of to let the light come in and shine. And there's a little story from Tagore, and he said there was a beggar that, there was this golden chariot that came through, and as he was begging with his begging bowl, and the charioteer pulled up, it's the essence of God, and asked, well, what have you got to give me? And he went through his bowl and he found a little grain of rice, and he gave that grain of rice to God, or the chariot. And by the time he got home, what he found in the bottom of his bowl was this tiny little gold piece. And essentially the lesson there is whatever we give to God, it becomes blessed. So every action, everything that we do to get ourselves out of the road becomes blessed. And that's what Master and Swami talk about. So that the importance of giving in the right way, that non-attachment, brings great blessings.
I was really inspired and lovely. Thank you. I just thought while you were sharing that a fun way to look at this topic for the week and becoming children of the light, well, realizing we are children of the light and remembering that truth, there's such a power in the way that Yogananda ji expresses this on our spiritual path. And it came to mind, every time we get given an affirmation and then we match it with the week's topic, it's really important to understand the connection there. And being self-disciplined, think of that, the fact that we do have free will, and it's how we apply our free will in our day-to-day activity that really makes self-control, that really makes the impact of where we head. And so with that, if you think about the opposite of, you were mentioning those moments in life, I think many of us are familiar with that term microaggression. You experience people who are aggressive in little tiny ways, and it builds up, and then it becomes this huge wave of energy, right? That can affect many people. And I want to just point out the opposite of that, which I think all of us could have a little fun with, because blessed are those, with the purest of hearts. And we want to be more focused on micro joy. So I thought that could be a little term that we as devotees start to bring into our life. So every time you do something with that self-control and there's a micro joy event, I want you to celebrate it. Because we don't celebrate and enjoy the wins of the spiritual path enough. We give a lot of energy to the negatives, but it's more powerful, and they've determined in self-motivation and self-management psychology, It's the positives that makes a behavior imprint. So it's not whenever we go bad, 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 that something changes. It's when we go, yay, you did it. And we have a micro joy and we experience the goal, because our path is really neat. It's a renunciation path, but it's to renounce all those things that keep us from joy. So every time that we apply our self-control and we experience that moment of joy, we want to say, oh, good, yeah, I did the right thing. And then, pat yourself on the back because you got the ego out of the way and you experienced the soul's joy. And that's what's going to keep you going when things get really hard. And I was recently talking with a friend who's just gone through an extremely big karma. And we were talking about how to get through that karma. And she said it's like right now she's at the very, she's gotten through the worst of it. So she already was at the bottom of the mountain, but now she's at a little precipice where she can see the rest until she gets to the very top, which is like overcoming the karma. And it was a really good reminder that these are the times when we need to put out more energy. And the reason we have a path with meditation techniques and energization exercises is because, as Gyandev says at the beginning of energization videos, he said, to be successful on the spiritual path takes great energy. And Swamiji said to overcome any karma requires more energy than the karma itself. You have to put out great energy. So anything that you can apply that self-control and you can channel your energy into those positive micro-joys, that's how you're going to keep making progress and make it a positive experience for yourself, so that when you do go into those moments where the challenges hit you, because that does happen, you feel prepared and you feel that warrior spirit and you know how to apply the techniques in the moment to get through those karmas. And you'll be able to say at the end of it all that every time you had a micro joy, you let in more light. And you reminded your soul that it is present and that it will ultimately win and be victorious. We just have to surrender the ego. It's the story of the Gita when the warrior filled with arrows, he wouldn't die without what? His own acknowledgement of surrender to the battle. And then once he could surrender, then the ego. We have to surrender the ego for it to finally be overcome. And we do that by affirming our light. We don't do that by saying, I am a sinner. I have sinned. It's completely the opposite. And every time that we acknowledge in that moment God's light, God's love, God's beauty, but without that attachment, so that's the purity of the heart, then that's when we can have that micro joy. It's those moments when we're completely present. It's those moments when we just feel the smile of someone in front of us, or we just feel the amount, just thinking of your guru can bring that micro joy. So every time you apply your self-control as a being and you experience it, let it win and keep winning until there is no separation between you, I, and thou. And that's our hope for all of you, is that, by doing this together, we can all help each other achieve that. And so we're very grateful to spend all of this time with each of you and to have had this opportunity. And we have a little music for you all. And so I'm going to...
I just love the prayer. Today it was so powerful.
You want to read it?
Yeah, I just think it's one to keep it in our minds. I crave nothing that the world can give me, Lord. O infinite perfection, make me one with thee.
So I'll just turn that. So our song